We met in the springtime when blossoms unfold. The pastures are green and the meadows were gold. Our love was in flower as summer grew old.
Hey, Saturday morning tunes.
Oh yeah, I got a little song. I like this song, so I'm putting it in instead of Along the Watchtower. Tell me what you guys think. Maybe I'll change it back. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, it just got all over the Watchtower. It's pretty bad.
Oh, it did.
All along it.
Oh, don't talk about it.
We tried to clean it up, but
It was stained on there.
Yep.
It was burnt into it.
all right. Well, this is a good way to begin a podcast, right?
Oh, it is.
Okay. Anyways,
With a big slurp into the microphone.
what should we talk about today?
Oh, we've already discussed this before a podcast, so it doesn't make sense for us to fake discuss it.
No, it does.
Oh, shut up.
Anyways,
So.
would you like to talk about drug legalization?
Oh yeah, I would actually. And what do you have to say about this, Carter? What do you think the libertarians are going to say about drug legalization?
Legalize all drugs.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so and we'll get
No, yeah,
into
really,
this.
legalize all drugs.
Yeah,
guys.
drug was a horrible idea. Really hasn't worked. Really
Yep.
Very ineffective.
So I mean, why should we legalize all drugs?
I mean,
Well,
no.
I mean-
First of all, why should we make them all illegal? Like, it's not our burden of proof.
That's
is it?
true.
As-
So I mean, why should you make it illegal? Okay, so I mean, the thing about making drugs illegal is that it's really evil to do that because people own themselves, and so they can make choices about what drugs they want to put into their own bodies, and by making it illegal, I mean that's immoral.
yeah, like
I would say that that's the basis of the libertarian case against the war on drugs.
yeah, it's like people own themselves, and it's immoral to violently force someone to your own ideology. And you know what people are gonna be like? Oh, you want drugs? That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, I want all drugs.
Yeah, they're all just
I'm gonna do every
you
drug
guys wanna
there
just-
is right now. If it were, I'll tell you what. If they legalized drugs, I would go down and shoot up heroin and snort cocaine all day long. That's what I'd do if they legalized drugs.
Is that what someone actually said? Like,
But that's an argument that people bring up a lot. I mean, this is true with a lot of government arguments. It's like, oh, well, if the government didn't do this, like if the government didn't enforce this law, then I would just go around, murdering people or whatever.
I love the moral degeneracy of
Yeah,
what the government
it
does
really
to people.
is.
Like when you have a government make something illegal, they're like, if it was legal, I would just murder people.
But thankfully the government's there to stop me from doing that. And it's like you do realize that there are other reasons not to do drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of drugs that are pretty horrible, like heroin and
Meth.
cocaine and stuff and meth, and they're
Well,
really
they're
bad.
all right.
Well,
No, I'm joking.
in moderation. No,
No, but I mean, even
they're
so,
pretty
people-
bad. I mean, so yeah, I mean, we're not trying to deny that they are really horrible and addictive. But the thing is that people have to make that decision for themselves, and by making these drugs illegal, people are like, oh, well, if you legalize drugs, then people are just going to do them more. Well, the thing is that they've been illegal for a long time now, and people still do them.
Yeah.
And I mean,
people do-
a lot of people who don't do them could do them if they wanted to, but they don't. I think that probably mostly because they realize that they're just going to descend into this horrible addiction that's going to kill them and destroy their lives.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, and it's not even universally true. Like for every time someone does any sort of drug, it's like, oh, every time they do it, their lives are
Yeah.
destroyed. But it's pretty obvious that people who do these drugs are it's their choice to make,
Yeah.
and now you're in a position where they have a social responsibility, and this could just be
And-
arbitrarily said about literally anything
Yeah,
you
you
don't
really
like.
could. Like you,
Like,
you
I would
could
be
say
like-
this about any personal choice that anybody makes that you don't like and maybe is unhealthy.
Yeah, and it's like no, and it's like, well, what society is what people make it. Like society is just interactions between a group of people, a group of individuals. And so, I mean, if drugs are legal, they're part of society, and the drug war is also part of society. But the point is people are like, well, I just like, it's just bad for society in general. It's people always give this excuse of society as this kind of vague thing where it's like, oh, it's bad for society, and they can always like anything. It's always anything that just they don't like oh, alcohol is bad for society.
We can just make it illegal now.
But what they're tacitly implying in that is like drug cartels are good for society.
And the thing is about this is that you're not. The choice still has to be made. Somebody ultimately still has to make the choice to do drugs or not. It's just that in this case, you're giving the choice to the government. Like the government now has that choice, for 300 million people.
Yep.
The government gets to make that choice for all
Oh,
those people.
we are the government.
Oh.
Never mind.
Okay, but so that's what it's doing. You're just removing the agency of the common people, and you're giving it all to the government.
Oh, but the government is the people, Cartor. Do you want to respond to that? Because a lot of people say
okay,
that.
we are the government. Okay.
If we are the government, then the government doesn't need to violently force us to do things. If we're doing it. That's like me being like...
I mean, like, oh, we voted for the government. Well, no.
No. Okay.
I mean, the thing is that just because the majority of people agree to vote certain individuals into certain positions, and then those individuals, a majority of them, vote to write things on paper and have men in blue costumes enforce them, that doesn't mean that like everybody agreed on it and it's moral.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious.
That probably wasn't the best explanation of it.
But I think, well, I mean, do you want to kind of like, because I really want to go into this concept. People be like, well, look, we are the government. I mean, we're represented it, and it's interesting. First of all, I mean, take the recent like poll of Senate where like 10, like I think there's like 5 or like 10%, like a very low percentage of people approved of Congress, and this was true before, and yet the exact same people got voted in.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, certainly, we definitely are the people.
Yeah, but you know what happens though is that when people see that statistic, they're like, aha, not enough people voted. If only people would just vote more.
Oh yeah,
this wouldn't happen.
Mandatory voting.
Yeah.
Oh. And I love how that's supposed to be in like, and one of the ways people say you implied being consent to the government is, oh, you voted for it.
Yeah.
But if you have to vote, then there's like no legitimate way of doing government. I think really when people start talking about mandatory voting, they're just kind of a priori assuming that the state is legitimate.
Yeah, they are.
And whatever the government does is legitimate, and like people's rights just come from it, which is such like an I don't want to say, I don't like to call people un-American, but it's a very like European sort of coming from like a feudalistic perspective of what a government is.
There are certainly people can be pretty statist in the United States, but I mean it's a whole different thing. I'm just
talking about historically.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I mean. And there is definitely a different culture regarding the state in Europe. I was reading this article about it, like this person from Germany, and he was saying that like Germany, they were wary of these American firms like from Silicon Valley investing in Germany and stuff, and they were like, oh no, don't worry, our father state will come and protect us from these evil cowboy capitalists. And that's what they really call it. In Germany, they call the state father state.
Yep.
And
I wonder. It's almost like
it's
almost like horrible totalitarian regimes flourish in a mindset where you think of the government as a parent that loves you.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, that's a complete Stockholm syndrome. It's like they're in an abusive relationship, like abusive parents or abusive spouse. They're like, oh well, he's okay when he doesn't beat me or when he's not drunk. He's okay. He protects me. So I'm just going to stay with them.
But I think, going back to the drug court, I think there's a lot of people who don't do drugs and are like, good, I'm glad people are locked up. I'm glad people are horribly suffering.
Yeah, it comes back to the drug war also. It's like, the government is people's parents, and, that the government has to be the one to be like, no, you can't get into those drugs. You can't do that.
Yeah,
so it's just this idea of how the people are just children of the state, and that the government has to watch out for them. If the government weren't doing that, then everybody would just be, high all the time and just not do any work and just be starving.
Yeah,
poverty.
I mean, think about that kind of mindset of like, how totalitarian someone really have to be. And think about, do you think that really the person who kind of has a mindset that everyone can't make their own decisions, that the government has to make it forward, do you think that they're really going to have any sort of free and equal society? Or do you think it's just going to be the government super powerful?
That's what always ends up happening, and we've seen this time and time again.
I mean, there's always like people being, oh, great father state, or whatever various thing.
Yeah.
And they always, this is like basically what communism is. I mean, communism is
probably the most extreme example of it would be the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah.
Or Red China or something.
I mean, like heavy totalitarian communism is like a great example of just. Like
where virtually every choice that people have is controlled by the state, where all the property and all the industry is controlled by the state.
All the means of production and because like people sort of do have.
And you could even the "we are the government" thing. That's probably the same lies that they were telling people in the Soviet Union, even like, oh, it's the proletariat. It's you, the common man.
I was about to get to that. So
I mean, it just shows that like that's just not true.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always like that. Well, people will be like, "Oh, well, it's totalitarian there, and people really vote,
Yeah,
these
but
dictators."
yeah,
And
I know. But the thing is that one of the lies that kept perpetuating it was that like, no, don't worry, we're looking out for your best interests because
yeah.
we're the proletariat,
If
we're the common man,
if 51%
we care about
percent
you.
of people are satisfied, then 49% of people can be enslaved.
Yeah, that's what ends up that's what democracy ends up being.
And I don't really see like why would this be for like I guess we're sort of getting away from the drug war now,
Yeah,
but I can put some more links to it, and maybe we can go into depth with it a little more. I don't have all my research in front of me on this, on all the articles I've read and stuff, um, but just kind of the mentality of totalitarianism and how it's like people don't see the government as this great thing that's going to come in and save them and protect them, and anytime it messes up, it's it can do better. And anytime that anything something bad happens, that's not the government. Like this is exactly what happens. This is
yeah.
systematic.
It's always like when the government fails doing something, it's like, oh, better fund it more.
Yep.
Better have them do it more. And it really goes back to that whole like the abusive relationship sort of structure of it. It's like, oh, my husband keeps beating me, but it's fine. I'll stay with him because he needs me or whatever. Or like my parents keep beating me, but it's okay because they love me,
Yeah.
or whatever, something like that.
I mean, I would
It's
have
like,
more
no,
sympathy for an abuse victim than somebody who's like, no, we should outlaw drugs and people can't do this stuff. I'm going to violently force people. Because I really think they are genuinely satisfied when they know that like people doing something that they don't find aesthetically pleasing are being locked up and murdered and beaten and raped and stuff because of that. Like I think that definitely makes a lot of people very happy. And I don't know, maybe because you're like a little more like optimistic. You're like, oh, people just love the government.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's hard to say sometimes what people think because I think that there's a sort of disconnect with because whenever I say legalize all drugs, people get like, whoa, 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 that's crazy now. These are dangerous drugs. The government's got to look out for people. But it seems like they don't quite realize that what it means when people say like the government needs to outlaw this, it it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, okay, people are just going to stop doing it. It means that the government is going to have to go around and violently force people to stop doing it. And that is going to lead to way worse hardships than whatever that thing
I mean,
was.
it's gonna lead to cartels, it's gonna lead to mafia. I
Yep,
mean,
yeah, and that's another thing that leads to it. Just leads to more groups. Like as if the government screwing you over wasn't enough. Now you've got the mafia, doing the same thing.
what
And so yeah, I mean that's what happens. The mafia came into the U.S. during Prohibition of alcohol in the 20s,
yeah, it
and
really got powerful.
that's when they got that powerful. And now with the drug war, all these cartels in Mexico and Latin America have become very powerful. And this is what happens when you make something illegal.
Yeah, uh, it's the direct effect. And, people talk
Yeah.
about like, people talk about a lot of the bad stuff the U.S. has done to like other countries, but this is a really good example of them. If we didn't have the drug war in our own states, like the cartels and the mafias there really wouldn't be even remotely as powerful because a lot of their money
Yeah.
comes from selling in the United States.
Yeah, so much of the other market is here.
And it's just interesting. How that's one of the things I notice how people like don't mention that they're like, oh, we just horribly exploited them, and then it's like, oh, but like whenever someone criticizes stuff the U.S. is doing, it rarely criticizes the government stuff. It's always like, oh, well, these companies went in and they like employed people, and but these employment conditions were way worse than what our standard is, so that means they're exploiting them and it's making their condition worse. Not to point out that not to mention that like almost every country that's had to go up out of poverty had to have a stage that has sweatshops or something like this. And this happened in South Korea, this happened in Japan, and those countries have become way more modernized and very healthy economies where people have better standards of living. But then they see this and like, oh no, sweatshops just make things worse for people. It's like, well, if they make them so much worse, why are people going in and doing that and doing these things? It could be like, well, they just lock them up. But I don't know. I don't see like these. I guess maybe I don't know that much about like every circumstance, but I haven't really heard examples of people like employing private armies to round up people. Usually, what they do is they'll go into a place like China and just have the government
have the
do it.
government. Yeah, that's what the government in China does.
Yeah,
And
and
of course, that's not.
yeah, and we would both like. I think everyone would agree
That's
that
really
that's really
evil.
horrible. But I don't think it just happens. Like I don't really think a company would even have the resources to be like, oh, we're just going to. Like, I don't know. I hear examples of people being like had made the working places, but I don't know. I can talk about this a little more.
Yeah, that's sort of diverging, but that's a good point. I mean,
Yeah, I think my point is that like people hold the state to this way lower standard than they hold the other
Yeah,
things like the free market.
yeah. I mean, because if there was a business doing something like that, they'd just be like, "Oh, you got to boycott it and stuff." But if it's the government, it's like, "Oh, we just got to fund them more, or we got to have them put in this new policy, and that'll solve everything."
Yeah,
And that's the mentality. It's like for everything else, people think, "Oh, well, if it's not working, then stop doing it." But with the government, it's like, "No, they're not doing it enough."
and the right does this a lot more with the drug war. I mean,
And with foreign intervention,
I was about to say,
sure.
but I was about to say the left. I mean, the right does this a lot with the drug war. Like they hold the things that the left does to so low standards. Like, oh, look at all this horrible stuff that these horrible policies the left is in play, and they criticize like Obamacare and other stuff like that. Right, but then they don't hold the same standards to the foreign policy.
Yeah, and then
the left does this with like the free markets and socialism. So they'll be like, they'll like try as hard as they can, but like, well, look, all these countries that employed socialism, it's not real socialism because factors that wouldn't have affected whether the country survived or not were there. Like, so for example, people be like, well, Saddam was a dictator, so that means it wasn't real socialism. And although that's true, the thing is, the people dying in Russia, they didn't just die because and they weren't living in bad conditions just because Stalin was like, ha, 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 I'm just gonna troll people. Like, I'm just gonna make life horrible for all my citizens for no reason. And the people who came after him didn't do that. They were all socializing the economy and trying to control it and trying to manage it through government policy. And all these government policies fails. Like, it wasn't like the government was effective at killing people. It was ineffective at running an economy, and this led to horrible deaths and stuff. And you see this in so many places, not just Red China or Russia. I mean, you see this in almost every like really unfree place like Venezuela or Argentina. And we've already talked about that on the podcast. These horrible places. But every time that happens, the leftists have some excuse.
Or Cuba.
Yeah,
that's a good example of it.
And there's always an excuse. But then it's like, oh, well, this one time, it's dictator in Chile, right? There's a Pinochet.
Yeah.
And then he sort of freed the market,
and Ronald Reagan liked him.
Yeah, and then he killed a bunch of people.
So that was the free market. He privatized things.
Yeah, and he did that.
Yeah.
With all these coins, but even though Chile is still very economically free, like it's way freer than it was, like 30 or 40 years ago. And Chile is
as a result, it's a lot. It's in a much better
one of the
state
best
than a lot of other countries.
like countries in South America to live in. Like, it's got really high standards of living and such. And it's really interesting to see people talk about that.
So since then they've gotten rid of the dictator.
Yeah, and they've gotten rid of the dictator. It doesn't have the same problems it had in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, it's really economically free, and it's a very prosperous place. So it's interesting how people are like, yeah, and people could accuse us of doing the same thing. It's like, oh, well, you're blaming the dictator on something that could be blamed on the free market. And I'm saying, well, okay, but we also we sort of have something like a double blind test here, where we had the dictator in, we took him out, and we saw what the free market was like without him, and it made Chile a very prosperous place, to live and stuff, and one of the best countries. And it wasn't like it wasn't like this was like some. Like weird stuff I had to like spend a bunch of time to research. Like, you can just Wikipedia like Chile and see it's like, oh, it's it's like most economically free, and it's got like very high standards of living and stuff. The best in like South America, I think. I can look that up after it, or you could just Google Chile and look at the Wikipedia page. But it's interesting when people talk about stuff like this. They're like, oh, the free market's so horrible. And then you look at the countries they're talking about, and a lot of times it's like either it's not economically free, or it's way better than they're talking about.
Yeah, there's this thing going around Facebook lately about Honduras and how they were planning on starting these supposed free market cities or something in the country.
I can explain it if you want.
Well, no, it's fine. So in Honduras, they were considering this policy of creating these cities that would have like common law jurisdictions and stuff, because in that country there's like the government is extremely corrupt, and there's lots of gangs and stuff. The idea was to have like more privately run law firms. Yeah, to have these sort of like private cities almost. And so Salon, I think, Salon,
yes,
who ran this article, there was like, aha, people have really horrible standard of living in Honduras. But the thing is that they haven't even put this policy into place yet.
Yep.
So they're looking at the statistics from what it is like now when there's none of this. And if you look at Honduras and how free they are, they're really, really unfree.
Yeah,
the government is extremely corrupt.
It's
It's really hard to start a business or to keep what you earn.
They were a socialist dictatorship for a long while, and that basically collapsed, and they had to start privatizing industries, which again is like you'd be like, oh, well, that's a free market. It's like,
But no, but the thing is that those industries were still in the back pocket of
yeah, I know
the corrupt government.
it's still like a
there,
very corporatist system.
and there's also all these gangs too that
but
also have
if you
similar
want to say,
thing.
oh, it's
But-
really private, well, again, it's very economic unfree, so you can't be like, oh, it's a free market. And they were like, oh, people have all these guns. Like, oh no, it has lower gun ownership than like all the countries around it.
yeah.
And so it was just this horrible like this but the biggest lie there was that it's like, oh, they're planning to implement they implemented these policies, and then he blames all the stuff on these policies that haven't been implemented.
Yeah,
yet.
they haven't even been implemented.
And I just
And
and my point about this is, how critical the left is of the free market, and then you compare that, and then I mean, think about if a Republican had like before Obamacare had been implemented, had been looking at the healthcare system, be like, this is what happens when you have Obamacare. I mean, do you know how he would have been like how many leftist outfits would have like mocked him? Like, I mean, that would have been like, he would have been like criticized, like, if it had been like a senator or something, blaming like Obamacare on things that hadn't been implemented yet. Every like all.
well, I mean, this is a little different because this isn't like a senator saying this. This is like a salon article.
Oh, that's true.
So
That's true.
it is a little different.
Yeah, but okay. So imagine if like somebody had said this. But my point here is, you have a good point. Like, but I think what I would say is why I said that is because I would say like not as many people would know it. So like if somebody had published like an article on Fox News, not that many people would have seen it. But if they had, they would have the reaction to be like, this is so horribly stupid. Like the people who did see, like, you're blaming something that's on Obamacare that hasn't been implemented yet.
Yeah.
Like, everyone would be super critical of it. But
I think it would also have to be something that people know less about. Like if it was something a little bit more obscure than that. Because I mean, most people haven't heard about this Honduras thing. It's not as big an issue as like Obamacare is.
Okay, I guess I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm just I don't know. It's hard to say like.
But I mean, how much criticism of this article have you seen from the left?
Yeah, I haven't really seen any. So.
I mean, like nobody. Nobody's come out and been like, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is wrong," or anything. Like, I don't know. Salon didn't take it. I guess my point is, it just seems to me like the kind of people who would read this and be like, "Yeah, that's true." Hold the free market to this crazy high standard. But then when you have like horrible government intervention and destroys economies and stuff, they're like, "No, it just wasn't the real intervention. It wasn't its true form." So I agree with you that I should make the analogy that it would be exactly the same thing.
I don't know. It just seems like you can just keep going back and forth on this sort of debate of like, well, these people are saying this, and I'd just rather get to the.
My point is
issue.
that people don't hold like when they criticize something, they don't hold their views up to the same standard of questioning or anything or scrutiny. And my point was that Republicans don't do that with foreign policy, and Democrats don't do that with the free market.
Yeah.
So again, do you want to talk some more about the drug war?
The drug war.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a complete failure.
It
really has. I mean, the thing is that, the basis for it, for us would be that it's immoral, of course. But if that's not enough for you, then you can just take a look at the statistics and look at how much, how many people's lives have been ruined by it. How many people have been imprisoned, and the toll that's taken on the economy to just have people rotting away in prison for years simply for possessing drugs, and not contributing to the economy at all.
But also,
that just horribly
how much
devastates.
violence have been done on innocent people because of the drug war.
Yeah, for sure. And this violence, that just we get these peaceful people who just did drugs or something, and then they get thrown in jail, where they get mixed in with actually violent people, and then they come out of it, and they're a lot more likely to commit an actually violent crime.
Yep.
And it just keeps perpetuating the cycle of violence. And then they also they raise their kids violently or something. They might beat their kids, and it just keeps perpetuating itself like this, and it just keeps making. And in addition to that, when people live in such horrible conditions, often they are more likely to turn to drugs.
Yeah.
Even so, it just keeps just going over and over again. It just keeps getting worse and worse with this perpetual cycle of violence and drugs and stuff, and it's all a result of the drug war.
When you have a government prohibition on something, it's like it's the ultimate regulation, right? So it's horribly restricting supply, meaning that because
the supply of it at all is illegal.
Is very low, meaning that demand's going to be very high, right? if supply is not meeting it. So that means that it's going to be a lot more profitable for people to do drugs, even though it's risky. People are, so if you're a poor person, and you're like a bad neighborhood, and you're like, and and you want to get out of poverty, like it's way more effective to sell drugs or something because of this illegality. People would be like, oh, they just do it more if it's legal. Well, no, if it was legal, it would drive the price down, and it wouldn't have people would be able to just sell it, and they wouldn't have to do have these extra costs of running it drug running and stuff, and you're getting it from the cartels and all this horrible stuff that's happening. So there's all this ways that the drug war destroys people's lives, and then people are like, well, oh, it's just bad for society. It's like it's already bad for society. And I was gonna say
this is worse for society because it if you really care about addicts, then you're not going to throw them in jail. So that's what the drug war ends up being, is that people are like, oh, we just got to make sure people aren't addicted to drugs. But all it does is it just throws these people who have addictions, really horrible addictions to horrible drugs, it just throws them in jail. And nothing is done about it. And when they get out, they'll probably just start doing it again. And they might even have it smuggled into prison.
Yeah.
And it just completely does not solve the problem of drugs, and it creates extra problems too. And it even makes drugs more dangerous. Like crack cocaine came about because of this, and drugs have become a lot more potent and a lot more dangerous. And it's just done the opposite of its stated goals. Drug.
The reason it makes drugs more potent is because there's a risk reward factor,
yeah.
right? So that you're going to go to prison for selling like heroin, or a very strong drug. Compared to you're still going to go to jail, right, for selling like a pound of weed, or I guess I don't know if it's the same drug, but I think it's also if it's like the stronger the drug is, the higher the price is, right?
Yeah, because you could have 2 pounds of weed, and one of them is a lot more potent than the other, and you're going to be running pretty much the same risk for trying to sell either of them.
Yeah.
So you might as well go with the more potent one.
And that's how drugs start to get more potent. And it's the same thing with
keeps
cocaine
going over
stuff.
and over again.
Because the higher potent drugs are going to get the same punishment, and it makes the drugs a lot worse. But what I was going to say is, look, if Republicans are like, yeah, we believe in free markets, then they should be for this. They shouldn't be like, oh, the government has to regulate people's lives and say what they can do with their money, because this is exactly what it is. And if Democrats are like, oh, I believe in individual liberty, then they should be for this. I mean, how many times have you seen the slogan be like, my body, my choice for abortion?
Yeah, it really is. And the thing about the war on drugs is, even though it has had such a huge impact on the country, and I mean, not to mention also, we didn't even mention how much money has been spent on it.
Yep.
I mean, how many billions and billions and billions of dollars have been
thrown into enriching cronies, bureaucrats.
Yeah, and just the prison industrial complex and the police state and everything.
Yeah, all these people are benefiting.
What about what? I mean,
it's not even that. It's like there's so many departments that benefit from it. It was like I was reading this, like the Parks Department benefits from the drug war and stuff, because basically what happens is all this Fed money comes in, and it's like, okay, you have to do these certain things, and each department's like, oh, I want to get some of that. So the drug war is
keep becoming the police forces keep getting more and more militarized because they got all this extra budget money.
But my point is that it's not just the police forces. It's almost
other departments
so many departments of government, like the drug money from the feds, and also just from the states too. It sort of goes in, and it just spreads out.
Goes into the government hole.
Basically, what happens is it draws roots everywhere in parts of the government, so that it makes it so hard to repeal the drug laws, because
this is why nobody will. This is why it's not like a huge issue.
This is why Obama's like, well, it should be like legalizing marijuana, not legalizing any other drug, just marijuana.
He still, of course, supports it being heavily taxed and regulated.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say anything about ending the war on drugs or anything.
But he's like, this should be at the bottom priority of young American stuff. I mean, things they care about, right? That's what he recently said.
I mean, that's the thing, is that it's just it's not brought up a lot by politicians.
No,
and
it really
it's because
isn't.
it benefits them so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who are entrenched and interested in it. So it's not just easy to people be like, oh, we got to win the intellectual debate. We just got to convince people. No, it's like this is the people in government's livelihood, and they're going to fight to keep it. And it's so funny how people are like, oh, police just enforce the laws, and then anytime anything gets drugs, people try to legalize drugs or do anything, the police chiefs are the one there being like, no, it's going to cause crime. Everything's going to get set on fire. We're going to have babies being thrown out windows. They'll be like heroin machines that little kids are going to, and it's like, and they always chain up all this fear. And they do the police chiefs and stuff, and the union and stuff. They gin up all this fear about stuff, and then the policy gets passed. It's like, and the police are like, oh, we just enforce the laws, we don't make them. Yet anytime someone wants to legalize something, the police are always like, no, you got to do it this way.
Yeah, because they benefit
Oh
from
yeah,
it so
they
much.
so benefit from it.
I mean, so much of their
It's so-
job,
it's so
so
much
much of their
easier.
jobs now is just enforcing drug laws.
Yeah, it's so much easier to go like bust some kid for having like weed than it
Yeah, than
is
it is to
than it is
solve actual crimes.
yeah, to solve like
like,
murders or
somebody
something, or
gets
go after
murdered.
like violent gang members.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, you got some. So yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is also it plays the whole debate on like income inequality and poverty and everything. This is the issue. Whenever people are like, "Oh, we gotta get rid of this stuff," they always say like, "Oh, we gotta raise taxes on the rich," or gotta put tariffs on and bring manufacturing back to the United States. Or it's always something like that. But they never go to the war on drugs. When the war on drugs has been the source of so much poverty, especially I might add for minorities like blacks and Hispanics,
Yep.
it's really affected them the most, I think. And
Yeah,
of course also in Latin America. And it's really affected the poorest people the most,
Yeah, like
and they really get screwed over the most, and it's created so much poverty and violence.
yeah, like Obama will go in and be like, like when the things like happen, like black teens or something gets killed, like with Ferguson and stuff, he'll always comment on like the race issue of it, but then he won't support policies that will definitely, like, he won't support
Yeah, he just doesn't see into people don't look.
He's like, there's this
farther into it.
horrible race problem in this country, and I'm gonna say, and he emphasizes this so much, and then he just goes out later and is like, well, you shouldn't care about legalizing marijuana. I mean, that has no effect on
Well, I mean,
blacks in
there
America.
really is. It is kind of a race issue.
I mean,
But I mean,
I think it's just a freedom issue. I don't really
Yeah.
consider, like, I
yeah,
wouldn't-
I'd agree. But I mean, the thing is that if you really care about helping out disadvantaged
that's the point.
minorities,
It shows
is that
it shows the
it
hypocrisy.
shows that people don't. These politicians don't really care about you.
And
They
that-
really don't care about you minorities.
Yeah,
I mean, about anyone, but,
they're just doing it to
especially-
serve their political ends of being like, no, you're racist.
They'll just be like, oh, well, they'll pay lip service to us, like, oh, we feel so bad for you guys, and then they just keep screwing everyone over.
Yeah, and like we said, like, if they really cared about this kind of thing, if they really cared about minorities, then they would be completely against the drug war. We're not saying that there aren't leftists who aren't against the drug war. There definitely are, probably more than conservatives. But mainstream people aren't that
Definitely,
much.
like the mainstream politicians.
And I mean, the
drug
example is
war
Obama.
just sort of, like a thing that people just are like, oh yeah, that's okay. I mean, Democrats might be a little bit more likely to be like, okay, maybe it's okay to sort of legalize medical marijuana. Or something.
We'll tax it like 50%.
But yeah, we'll still do something like that. But it's just.
I mean, I think that's changing.
Ultimately, both parties support this.
Yeah,
But I think though definitely the tide is turning. Right? As
yeah,
more states have legalized
millennials
marijuana. And,
are definitely in support of it.
Yeah.
You and me.
Yep.
Are we millennials? I think we're on the
we would.
very young
like
side of that.
The very end of it.
Yeah.
That generation. But yeah, so definitely we're changing it. I guess the generation after us will probably be even more so.
Yeah. Or they'll become horribly more statist. You never know.
Well, we'll see.
But because I don't know. I guess I think our generation will be like, you gotta legalize it, and the next generation will be like, it's gotta be free. People have to pay for it. And it's like, God damn it.
Socialized marijuana.
Yeah, that sounds like,
I have a human right to drugs.
you know what? That sounds like a Republican thing, like a scare tactic thing that they would say, where they're gonna be like, oh, they're supporting healthcare. They're just gonna want all these free drugs. So I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
Because we're completely
This is just speculation. I mean,
against
it's
the
hard to
drug
say,
war.
like a whole other generation.
But
That's right now just.
I don't know.
little
But
kids.
the argument always is, like, nowadays it's like, oh, it's a necessity, and people consider a necessity is always changing all the time. But so yeah, I feel like we've talked about
So,
this.
anyways,
I feel like we could do like a more researched argument and give you like a lot more statistics, and we might do another episode on that in general. But we sort of were just talking about this in general. We're also talking about political power, how it influences stuff.
yep,
And
Yeah,
kind
a lot
of
of stuff,
hypocrisy of the left and right.
yep, and how there really isn't that much of a difference between them, because they both agree on so many key issues like this.
Yep.
You know.
I mean, it's not like, and we're not saying like all the left is like against Stoker, because we definitely do know people before that. But in general, like
But like the politicians, the people in power, definitely.
well, I mean, the most powerful man in the world who's a Democrat is saying,
Yeah.
you got legalize drugs. But I don't know. It seems to me like even with Obama, like, maybe it's just me, but it seems to be like there's not that many people who are really like, yeah, Obama's great anymore.
Yeah, at this point, I think people have
sort of been.
the hope has died down.
Oh, yeah. I guess the
And
problem.
now it's just gonna get, people are just gonna
Oh, people are getting hyped for Hillary.
get
though.
fired up for Hillary or
Oh yeah.
whoever's next. So, I guess that wraps it up.
Yeah. Show something.
Yeah, have good breakfast.
Yeah.
Remember,
if people actually listen to this breakfast, I'll definitely put this out this morning. I'm sorry for before.
Yeah. Usually
So next week. Well, I definitely had some problems with my computer, like shut down. The RAM was horrible. I mean, what
That's
do you
true.
want?
You did.
So
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Next
That
week,
sucks.
selling your organs. What do libertarians think on that? You should be able to sell your organs. Is it really like? I feel like if you listen to this podcast, it's very easy to figure out what a libertarian position is. Like is there violence?
Which one violates people's rights?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, people will be like, "Oh, you got right to life," but so the long and the short of it is should we legalize?
Anyways,
should we legalize selling organs? Yes.
Yep.
And we'll get into that more later.
Selling organs.
So don't initiate.
So yeah, remember, guys, if you see somebody doing something that you personally object to, like I don't know,
selling organs,
like they're selling their organs, or they're doing drugs, or they're gay, or they have guns, or or they're evading taxes or something. It's like just don't initiate force against them, okay?
Yeah, please don't go up to them and like.
And please also don't empower politicians to do that for you.
Yeah, I was about to say don't go up to them and threaten them to to bring them to your head. Like if you see somebody doing this you don't like, don't point a gun at them, bring them to your basement and lock them up for 20 years or something. And don't get the government to do that either, okay?
Yeah, don't
faded. There's frost at my door. The birds